We'll end this unit by discussing a very important team ritual and practice, which is used in every Agile method and outside of Agile as well. It's called the retrospective, and this practice is mentioned in the Agile principles. At regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behaviour accordingly. So being able to practice self-improvement as a team, to work to improve as part of your daily work is a crucial part of what it means to really be agile. A retrospective ritual is held at the end of an iteration, typically before planning the next one, although you can hold them at any regular interval. Lots of teams hold larger retrospectives less frequently, perhaps quarterly, and there's a very similar exercise called a learning review or a post-mortem, which is conducted after an incident in IT operations or as site reliability engineers. The point of a retrospective is to reflect on and learn from the past as a team. Let's look at how things have been going and think of ways we can improve. In terms of improvement, it's useful to take a scientific approach, to think about a hypothesis, about how we could get better as a team, and then design an experiment to test the hypothesis, and based on that to implement the idea or not. There are very many possible exercises you can conduct as part of a retrospective. There's lots of books on retrospectives. There's lots of blog posts on retrospectives. These are all design thinking activities conducted with the team, working together, typically using either a physical board with sticky notes or a virtual board with sticky notes. They're all activities that make use of divergent and convergent thinking as part of ideating around the topic of how do we improve as a team. So one very common retrospective exercise is to draw up on a whiteboard or a virtual board this canvas on the right, which has 5 areas. Stay the same, do less of, stop doing, start doing, do more of. Another one is a very common exercise on the left with 3 categories: what went well, what could have been improved, and ideas for actions to try out. And these exercises typically proceed in the same way, using the design thinking approach that we've discussed, where individuals write sticky notes and post them up. And then once that's been done for a few minutes in silence, then the team consolidates by reading through all the stickies and moving stickies they've written on top of other people's stickies that talk about the same thing. And then perhaps by dot voting, giving everyone a certain number of votes, say 3 or 5 votes, basically to use how you want. And then using the time you have available, you discuss the stickies with the most votes in reverse order. So starting from the one with the most votes and going down until you run out of time. So that's a common approach to conduct a retrospective exercise. And then crucially at the end, you've got to think of what you're going to do differently. What's our hypothesis on how we can improve? What experiment can we run to test it? And then go and try those experiments out and report back, crucially, at the beginning of the next retrospective on how those experiments went and whether you want to continue doing that idea that you came up with. It's important to vary the activities. It's quite easy for retrospectives to just become kind of group discussion sessions or ways for people to get out their feelings. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't necessarily lead to improvement. So it is important to mix up the exercises, try different exercises out so that it doesn't become boring and routine and so that you continue to derive value from it. Perhaps the most important thing about retrospectives is what's called the retrospective prime directive. So this is written in the first book about project retrospectives in the context of software, which was written by Norm Kurth. And he says that at the beginning of every retrospective, everybody should say out loud this retrospective prime directive. Or alternatively, you can print it out on a piece of paper or put it on a virtual sticky and put it somewhere where everyone can see it. But this is This is what the Retrospective Prime Directive says. Regardless of what we discover, we understand and truly believe that everyone did the best job they could, given what they knew at the time, their skills and abilities, the resources available, and the situation at hand. Now, almost always people make mistakes, not because they're evil or dumb, but because, as the Retrospective Prime Directive says, they didn't have the necessary skills or abilities or the right information or the correct resources, or there was some other problem in the situation that made it hard for them to make the correct decision. So even if that's not true, it's still a good idea to believe this, because this is how we can make sure we focus on improving our system and improving our organization rather than blaming individuals. It's very easy when things go wrong to find someone to blame. Almost always, it's not that person did something wrong because they were dumb or stupid. It's because they didn't have the best information or they didn't have the right tools available. And so if you think about what would happen if we fired that person and replaced them, often the replacement would make the same mistakes because they would have the same bad information or the same inadequate tools. And so the important question when something goes wrong or when we find something that can be improved is, how can we make our systems better? How can we help people make better decisions? How can we help the team become more effective? How can we give people better tools? And that's what a retrospective should be focused on. How do we improve our organizational system? How do we improve our team's performance by getting people better information, getting people better tools, changing the way we work, doing process improvement, these kinds of things. And in order to focus on that and not on the individual people involved, that's why we say or silently read the Retrospective Prime Directive, to prime us to focus on system level improvements.